Welcome to this talk on the series called Boots, Belts and Berets, which is part of the Value Talks network. I'm Rohit Agarwal, and my guest this evening is a Marine Commando, as the title indicates. He's Commodore Shiv Tiwari. Apart from being my coursemate as well as a classmate from school, Shiv is an accomplished career both inside the Navy as well as in his second innings in the Civvy Street. Shiv has been a Marine Commando, a Special Forces officer in the Navy. His early qualifications include clearance diving, bomb disposal, field intelligence, and platoon weapons. He's, of course, a qualified paratrooper and a swimmer delivery vehicle pilot. Apart from sailing the seas and underwater, he's also served in the counter-terrorist environment in Jammu and Kashmir. He's got the distinction of commanding all the Marcos units that the Navy has, the first officer and the only officer to have done that so far. He's also been an instructor at the Navy's diving school as well as the Navy's War College. Shiv took early retirement from the Navy and he started his second innings as a entrepreneur. He, along with another naval colleague, started Arista Risk and Corporate Solutions LLP, which is an initiative aimed towards a secure future, providing niche solutions to corporates, governments, and non-government organizations. Welcome, Shiv.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you for the gracious introduction and also inviting me on your show. It's a privilege and on both accounts, one, to participating in Value Talks being hosted by you and also being part of this forum, as you mentioned rightly, classmate and coursemate, and having so many years together. Privileged to be here, and thank you to all the guests who also logged in, and be happy to share experiences as we proceed with Rohit on the show. Thanks, Rohit, again.
So here's what we will do. I will ask some questions to Shiv and he'll share his experiences with us. And thereafter, I will throw it open to the audience and you can ask your questions from Shiv. So Shiv, we've grown up together. We know each other since childhood. Your father was in the army, but then you decided to don the whites instead of the olive greens. Why was that so?
Other side always looks whiter. So yes, it was actually more to do with, having lived in the army environment, which was very inspiring and to all of us in that time. It was also to about, see a different aspect of the military, explore a little more, having been in the army environment. And I had a passion for actually to, fly, like most young boys have. And I was leaning towards the Air Force. But at that point, the army had a celebration with my dad. It was that why not look at naval aviation as a route. Of course, I went for that challenge. Didn't clear the medicals there. And then landed up in the next best exciting thing, which I felt was on offer. And that's the Special Forces in the Navy. And that's how it, I think, happened.
Right. So, in the army, you don't join the Special Forces directly. You join an infantry battalion and then you opt for the Special Forces battalion. So then you undergo probation and all that. Is that the same in the Navy, or do you directly get commissioned into the commandos?
No, actually, you go through your basic courses after you get commissioned. And it's only after that it's equivalent to the Army YOs, we call it the sub-lieutenants technical courses, battery of courses, which you do on various specializations, sub-specialization over a period of about 14 months. And it's the end of it. In our times, you had to initially volunteer for the clearance diving cadre of the Indian Navy. So that's how the journey began. About a year's service, year and a half service, I volunteered for that. Having done that program, the next vertical specialization which the Navy offers is deep diving, saturation diving, and also the Special Forces, the Marcos as we know them today. So it takes about 2.5 years before you end up qualifying yourself as a Special Forces person in the Navy after doing your clearance diving and then the special training with the Marcos. So the journey is kind of similar, but a little different because after that, you're permanently into that cadre. So
right.
That's how.
And, tell us a little about the force itself. Marcos is something that, not very many people are familiar with. SEALs is very glamorous and talked about and written about, but own, naval commandos or marine commandos. So tell us a little bit about the force and its evolution.
Exactly. I think for the best part of our existence, we've kind of maintained a been silent on most of the things. It's only lately that, you start hearing a little about the Marcos and a little more visibility is coming. I think we are in the information age, and it's reaching a point where talking about things is also important to, greater awareness amongst people. And couple of movies have been made about the special forces, which have recently come out. So I think as a community, we are coming out to be a little more open about what we do. But actually, the role that divers have played has been pretty critical, even if you look back into history. If I can touch a little bit, you are an enthusiast, Rohit, so might be interesting. So initially, in the Second World War, the Italians developed the underwater combat diving skills, basically because the Allied shipping was creating havoc and the resources were meager. So they felt that if you could do, some clandestine attacks to disrupt shipping in various harbors and ports would be a cost-benefit analysis, as you would say in corporate jargon. So yes, the evolution of clearance diving as a form of, it dates back to many other eras also in military combat, but in the modern
Shiv,
world, I would
can
say.
I just interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Can you just, for the benefit of the audience who may not be aware, what exactly is clearance diving?
Okay. So diving is principle remains that you wear your gear. It could be breathing, as you call a scuba set, to go underwater. But subsequently, if you want to carry out operations, you need to be stealthy. And for that, you use different kinds of gases. For instance, you use pure oxygen. You need use mixed gas diving, which has it as advantages in not, putting out your bubbles into the ambient waters to remain stealth. So clearance diving basically emerged as a discipline which was for mine clearance. So that's where the jargon comes from.
Right.
So there used to be MCDOs, mine clearance diving officers qualified. And then a combat diver, when I say is a clearance diver, his role is for mine clearance and also for certain offensive actions underwater. So that's broadly the principle, and which I was talking about, which the Italians effectively used against the Allied shipping.
Right.
So over
Right.
the
Thank
years,
you.
it became form part of special operations method of disrupting enemy shippings, installations, the likes of that. And somewhere I would say in closer to pre 1971 is where the Indian Navy also, created a very, very, what do you call, a formidable cadre of clearance divers who played a very important role in the war in some sort of attacks. They were, now it's all sort of declassified. People from that generation have also been, facilitated interactions across in Bangladesh. So this force was trained in Mukti Bahini. And an interesting thing happened with us earlier days when we were growing up in the cadre. There was very little talk about that because it was hush hush. And subsequent to my retirement, we were doing an assignment in Bangladesh. And at the end of that, we tour in go around Dhaka, and we were at the Liberation Museum. And we were just walking around when suddenly in this section, we just saw there's a whole, there pictures and a lot of content captured about what our, divers had done in training, the Mukti Bahini. And it was very heartening to know that, whilst we were still covert and keeping it low key, our, the Bangladesh had really put that up in display and took some photographs and sent it back to our guys. And hey, we are here, right, sitting right here. So it was pretty exciting. Yeah. So yeah, from that role in what they played in the 71 war, the cadre thereafter grew, and somewhere I would say close to mid of the 80s, the Navy realized that they wanted a three-dimensional force because, combat was evolving and you needed people to do maritime operations of similar nature in the maritime sphere, and as well have the capability to be employed from any dimension. And that's how the Indian Marine Special Force came up in the year 1987. Later rechristened in 1991 as the Marine Commando Force, which is still the official name, and popularly started being known all as the Marcos, as the, all of us know it today. So broadly, yeah, that's the history of the evolution of the Marcos, if I can say.
Right. And so the special forces of the three services, they work very closely long before this talk of theater commands and CDS and all that come about. There's been always very, very close I mean, those who are in the forces know about it. You talk about it with friends and all. But can you tell the audience a little bit about this inter-service cooperation between the special forces?
Yeah, I think what I like to bring out before going into the inter-service thing is that what I felt during my journey, that irrespective where you are, whether it's in India, across the three special forces, that I mean, these services, that's the Army, Paracommandos, the Garuds, the Marcos, when you see people from the special forces, they usually have a very, very similar mindset. And probably that's why they're there. And I mean, I had the privilege of traveling across to the US, and we interacted with the US Navy SEALs. And I found that, whether you were sitting in the US or you're sitting here, finally the man on ground is still the same. So when you sit together as Special Forces guys in the evening over a drink is when you realize that, hey, I think mindsets are very similar. So coming to the point of being, the cooperation, I think there's a tremendous amount of cooperation between the three services at the tactical level, at the unit level. In fact, I'd say that, I've done more courses with the Army than I did in the Navy. Couple of them you rattled out, field intelligence and platoon weapons and bomb disposal. So the number of courses I did with the Army in growing days was fantastic and made a great set of
As it is,
friends.
you have OG blood.
Yeah. So I was pretty comfortable in that. And yeah, it was great interacting. But beyond the initial training, there is a lot of cooperation which happens even in the regular day-to-day, platoon level trainings, interaction between units, joint camps, tri-services camps. So a lot of skill and disciplines get exchanged, learning value happens. So if I would say that, is the SF community interacting? I think it's interacting tremendously, and there's a lot of learning from each other and evolving from each other's lessons. So yeah, there is a lot of cooperation. But when we come down to these structures, we are moving towards cross structures. I'm sure everybody is aware of the ambition of making a joint special operations command, which is still in the form of a smaller entity right now. And they are sort of, together to address missions which may be of strategic level missions, with each one's skills being employed correctly. That's a work in progress, and I'm sure it'll be successful. But it's very clear that the path has to be joint, and application of force has to be combined to get that final punch what we need. So yes, I think there's a lot of good communication happening and good interactions happening on that.
And the fact that you have served in counterinsurgency operations in the valley shows that there is total interoperability, as they say, between the three services, right?
Absolutely. So I mean, we've selectively chosen to be in hotspots, which I'm sure we keep reading, and in that sense, the Marcos are operating wherever there is action, because it's for an SF outfit to stay alive, it is important to be where the action is, otherwise training in peacetime is good, but the real experience comes when you're deployed. And in that sense, they're deployed all over wherever there is challenges as far as our nation is concerned as we speak. And whenever we've operated, like you said, integrating at the tactical level and conducting joint operations, looking at your domain conjunction with the Army, or it could be the Garuds, the results have been great. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I can say with my experience in the environment in J&K, I think much has been already written about the successes there. So this just speaks volumes of when you get to the grassroots level. Yes, it is a successful program or a successful way to go forward.
Right. And, at the end of the day, I think it is also, it's not about the organizations, it's about the individuals. And like you said, that the special forces people across the world have a similar mindset. And a little bit about you meet a coursemate from the army who's in the para commandos, or a Garud who's, a coursemate or who's a school type or something. And then you gel, and then, the walls are down. I'm reminded, recently I had the honor of interviewing Air Chief Marshal Suri and General V.N. Sharma on this book I was doing on Maldives operations. And both of them independently mentioned the same thing to me. This operation took place in 1988, and back then there was no CDS and there was no IDS also, Integrated Defense Staff. He said both of them said work was that I am from RIMC, Sharma is from RIMC, Brigadier Balsara, who was the para brigade commander, was from RIMC. So we had three RIMCOs, so we just had to pick up the phone and talk to each other, and that is how it happened. There were no bureaucracy, there were no clearances. So I suppose that is what interoperability is all about.
Yeah, exactly. I think the world works like that. Whether you're in the services or you're outside, networking is the buzzword. And it's your networks which finally get you your results. And
having spent a fair amount of time outside on the CV street, I think transparently they're also the old boys network, say, guys from the particular IIM, or, that also works in a similar manner.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, because I think the narration that you said about the Maldives operation is one such thing. But every time there has been a successful mission, it's because of people that you connected with. It is the one-to-one, human-to-human relationship that you build that brings together the trust between each other, rapport that you develop, which finally gets you whatever you want. In such operations, I would say that if you don't have that connect, you will never be able to move forward. Structures are there. And structures will be there in every organization, whether it's the military or whether it's in the corporate world or outside. It's how you leverage those structures, because finally behind each structure is a person. If you don't, get connected with that person, I don't think much can be achieved. So yes, finally the old boys network, the school types and all that is what really brings it together. You're right.
So unlike the Marcos, the US SEALs, they are highly glamorized, a lot of movies, a lot of novels and things. So one read a saying that they have that the only easy day was yesterday. So what does that mean, and is that applicable, or is there something similar in Marcos as well?
Yeah, I think it's a interesting sort of a slogan which they use. In fact, over time, like I mentioned, we've had a lot of cross interaction with the Navy SEALs, and they're been influenced in the philosophy, our thinking. Basically, I think that statement really reflects is that every day is going to be a new challenge, and that challenge is going to bring in greater difficulty. So be ready for it, because the yesterday was easier than what tomorrow is going to be in a special operations or a SF operator's lifestyle. So that's principally what it means. In fact, I'd like to share here again is that the commonality and how your understanding is develops over time because of these cross interactions and how you pick up things from each other. Interesting trivia is that I can share this little froggy here. So it's got an interesting story. This is somewhere in the late 90s. We were doing a camp on the West Coast with the SEALs. And in the evening, just, gathered around a bonfire, some guys were chit-chatting, and there was this SEALs petty officer who, in the conversation, was told by divers and Marcos that, we call ourselves frogmen. Now, that's a jargon being used, which came into being much earlier during the World War, frog being amphibious and being able to operate in different terrains. So now this guy couldn't really comprehend a frogman, and he was a great artist. So he picked up a pen and paper and he drew this fellow. So he's
not visible, Shiv. It's too small.
Okay, sorry, but anyway, I'm sure this scene. This guy is carrying a MP5, which was our standard weapon, close quarter battle weapon in those days, and a diver's knife on his calf. So that's how the frogman crest sort of thing which we adapted and has now become popular with us for everything evolved thanks to an interaction with a Navy SEAL who drew this for us. So again, it leads back to whether it's a philosophy of yesterday only yes was an easy day, or whether it's a frogman or a crest which we have adapted over so many years. So that's how the community is together.
So I again, drawing an analogy with an entrepreneur or a life as an entrepreneur, would you say it's a similar thing? No easy day.
I'm sure it is. It's because who can say that tomorrow is not going to be difficult? So yeah, when you go into entrepreneurship, and for anyone, I would say you're always sort of facing challenges every day. And in one of the most fundamental things which I learned as being one of the fundamental things that I learned being an SF operator is what I was saying is part of your mental training is that whenever we were called into the ops room or operations room and be briefed and were told that, okay, that's your target, the first thing which came to our mind was that, okay, if we have to reach there and complete the mission and reach the target, so what are the obstacles? So, it was never that we were unfazed by that there will be obstacles. It is taken for granted that obviously if to reach your target, there will be obstacles. So, okay, let's find out what the obstacles are and now figure out what is the smartest and the easiest way to cross that. So when we talk about, entrepreneurship or any other thing, in fact, life in general, if you are unfazed by the obstacles that lie ahead of you, and you take them as a natural sort of, phenomena which is going to be lying in front of you, the idea is to put your strength and mind towards how you're going to cross them and not be intimidated by them. So I think, yeah, in my life, I would say that is one of the biggest things that I learned being an SF guy, how to face obstacles. So yeah, definitely yesterday was the last easy day and tomorrow is going to be with challenges.
Shiv, I've heard a lot of your stories, and I'm sure there are a lot that I still haven't heard. Can you share some? I mean, you have a whole repertoire of interesting stories. Some stories which our audience will find interesting.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I've got too many stories because life is a big story in itself. But yeah, a couple of interesting anecdotes when we were discussing coming on the show together. So, like, what would be interesting? And does that story have a sort of a meaning for me? So I kind of picked up a couple of things which, like I just said about this obstacle, fundamental change in the way I think. So we keep doing various kinds of funny things which special forces guys are supposed to do. Going back to starting our training days when we were doing a diving course, we used to train in the Cochin Channel, and the best of our backwaters or our inland waters are not the cleanest. There are all kinds of stuff floats around. So we used to do about each typically one underwater endurance would be about 2.5 hours, and we would do another endurance. Sometimes it would be 3 endurance, 6 hours underwater, and in between the gaps you would come ashore to the side, and without necessarily having to change your set, that used to be a tea break, where you're wearing a set, you're standing in the middle of this channel or on the edge of this channel, and you take your mask off and you remove the mouthpiece, and somebody crawls into the water with a cup of chai and 2 samosas. So the early lessons was, so whilst doing this one of these days, that if I can, some stuff floated past us, so you just conveniently pushed it aside, and you continue eating your samosa because that's so the priority of prioritization was the first lesson that I learned. What is more important at this stage? Is it the samosa that you're eating or the shit which is floating by? So you need to deal with life like that. There'll be a lot of stuff floating by you.
You can't be finicky.
Yes. So
Yeah,
everybody is going
absolutely.
to, a lot of stuff is going to float by you. You need to understand how to push it away and then enjoy your samosa within that. So that
There's a big
is
life lesson in that.
absolutely. So sitting in the middle of the channel in this filthy, murky waters is one
Because
learn.
that's what you need to do in life. You need to ignore all the unpleasant and nasty things and enjoy your life nevertheless.
Absolutely, and build resilience to tolerate it. So
Right.
another interesting incident, something similar, was as special forces, our operations are at sea, and we get launched from wherever out at sea. And when you dark night operations, all you can see is certain stars. And this is, I'm talking about pre-GPS days, when there was no luxury of having GPS. So it was all astronavigation, or with your compass you were trying to navigate to hit the coast. And you didn't know what lay ahead of you. There was typically, when you came close to the shore, there was a surf zone and you could just hear it. And if the moon was slightly up, or the starlight, you could make the surf zone, the white little bit of white surf that you could spot here in your rubberized craft, and you're trying to make landing. You don't know whether there are going to be rocks ahead of you, or whether you're going to topple in that surf zone. But anyway, fact is that you need to chug along, and once you hit a particular point, it's a point of no return. Now you're committed. So you just ride the waves, and then you hit the coast. Finally, when you make landing after about 3 hours at sea in the middle of the night, and reach safely, usually the guys who've launched you would give you a little bit of carton with fruit tins and stuff, like packed food, so just in case you drift and you have to survive, so you have the little survival ration. So that invariably, every time we did these operations and we hit the coast, the first thing was sigh of relief, sit down and open those tins. We reached safely, so now let's just enjoy this little goodie bag of survival kit rations that we were given, with chocolates and stuff like that. So one of these things we were reached, and we settled in, because I think somewhere close to monsoon, the weather was not, so we were looking for shelter, and we found this little canopy on just at the edge of the beach, where the hinterland and beach finishes. So we went and settled down inside, and we didn't want to light
Gazebo.
a gazebo. Yes, so I'll tell you what the gazebo was. Anyway, we settled down. Halfway through eating our meal, we suddenly felt, where are we sitting? And there was ash all over, and so it was a little funny. And so then somebody switched on his torch, and then looked around. We realized we're sitting in the center of a Shamshan Ghat cremation spot.
I had guessed it.
So the next thing was, what do we do? Should we continue eating, or should we lift ourselves? But the beauty was that as a team of 8, the combined reaction was that everybody didn't bother over where we were sitting, and they continued to finish eating what they were eating. Yeah, so when I say that, SF operators think alike, it's also about, prioritization. What's the priority right now? Oh, gratitude that we've been safe, we landed, so let's just finish what we are doing. Your processing power becomes very sort of, clear what's important and what's not important. So wherever you're sitting doesn't matter. So yeah, again, a small life lesson based on certain operational, things that we kept doing. Yeah. Anyway, a couple of them maybe later as we proceed. I'll
Right.
throw in a couple of more.
So,
So
you did an early transition into the corporate world. In fact, you took it a step further and you went into entrepreneurship. Tell us about that. What prompted you, and how, a little bit about your journey.
I think for me, it was exploring a little more beyond military life. And like you said, came from a army background, joined the Navy, had the privilege of, at a younger age, doing a lot of things which all young people want to do, jumping out of aircrafts, being a underwater SDV or a swimmer delivery vehicle pilot, and operations engineer. So it was very satisfying younger years. And then as one grew, did get the chance of and the privilege of commanding all our 3 units. So I think, I'm sure you and most of the people who've been in service would say that when you finish your command is like, what next? I mean, there's nothing more left to do in the services. So maybe we all go through that, because that's the pinnacle of action career. So looking for a little more action, I thought that it may be a great idea to start something independently with your learning. And I was pretty clear that I would like to start something on my own, rather than, if we had to work, then Indian Navy was the best organization that you could ever thought of working for. So very clear on that. And then, like you mentioned, with a postmate of ours, we started off with Arista. And Sameer and I kicked off in 2016 with this little idea that we had in our mind, that what is it that we know and how do we apply it into so security is like what comes to everyone's mind, because you're qualified and you think that you're in the services. So the getting into the field of security. But what I like to bring is that security is not just about guarding and running a, manpower intensive guarding supplying company. Security today is expanded in domains of right at the apex level to the smallest. And technology is playing a huge role in security, the growth of security today. So within security, I would say there are multiple dimensions. For us as special forces, it was a great learning because, as you would know, that whatever missions we were trained to do in peacetime gave us a perspective of looking at things as an outsider, not as a defender, as an offender. So, what are the lessons there, right? Why is it that our teams are still successful? So, how do you apply it into designing defensive sort of, security, integrating with the technology? So, having sort of, put that together, one came up with sort of a model where you could use your past learning a little differently in the advisory capacity for designing defenses, putting tech in the right place where it is required to, not just because it's available, and covering the gaps principally there. So I think that was the initial thought. And then as we moved along, we realized that a great amount of good work is happening. I'm talking about 6 years. We are in our seventh year now. Great amount of work is happening in the country. And therefore, we, with our knowledge, if we can, come together with the Indian startup community, we should be able to help them. And that grew over the last 3-4 years, and now we're happy to be working with a bunch of tech companies, working on a couple of prototyping design projects which have come up thanks to initiatives which are being taken in the country through various programs. So yeah, discovering and exploring, like I said, of what and applying it into the new world, uh, which is a different environment, is the challenge. And that's how it sort of evolved. Yeah, I mean, what I'd like to say more is that you need to understand yourself first. You need to do your SWOT. You need to figure out what your strengths are. A lot of us in our transition probably feel that everybody else should know what I know, but usually that's not the case. You need to figure out, I would say, that how can I apply into somebody else's environment, because you're transitioning into a second career, or you're progressing into a different environment. So if one can sort of pay a little attention to the environments and then see what value you bring to that table. I can 100% sure that all of us, while serving and ex-military today, have tremendous strengths. There is nobody who doesn't carry value. Everybody carries a lot of value. It's about aligning that value, understanding that value, and putting it on the table in front of somebody else for him to understand. And that's how he's going to pick you up, whether it's as an employee or even as an entrepreneurship, to give you the opportunity to solve their problem. So yes, I would say that that's very important to bring value on the table, and that you have to do that. It's not going to happen that people are going to come running and say, okay, come, I need. If they come, they will come with certain traditional mindsets. But if you want to break
Stereotypes.
away, yes, stereotypes, exactly. And I think one thing is also important today is that corporates and the world beyond the military have to understand and learn more about our military, learn more about the skill sets what military people bring to the table, the value that they have and they carry, the experience that they carry. And I think it'll be a interesting thing for both sides to cross over and cross learn and each other's skill sets, because there's a huge talent pool which exists every year, and really value add to various programs and organizations can come from there.
Absolutely. And in fact, this is one such step in that direction. I thought that we should have these talks where you have people from all walks of life, so that give a little bit more insight into the lives of different types of people in these services, different domains in these services, so that, exactly give that window.
gotta focus on yourself, on your faith, on your dreams, on your mind, on your health, yeah. You gotta work, never tell, keep your head down.